I'm satisfied that we have the two people who were directly involved with the murder.
He said, "I didn't do it." He said, quote, "You're killing an innocent man."
Y'all raped our women, and now you taking the country.
Eyes were closed. Our eyes closed. The shots rang out.
I've had to notify the family of deaths for years and years and years.
He always said that through his music, that one day I'm gonna put Jasper, Texas on the map. Just wait and see.
Now, alleged white supremacist Lawrence Russell Brewer has been...
Number 4, Daniel Lewis Lee. Daniel Lewis Lee was a ruthless criminal who was sentenced fatally for his role in the 1996 slaying of a family of 3 in Arkansas. He was fatally punished on July 14, 2020 at the United States Penitentiary, Terre Haute, Indiana, becoming the first federal prisoner that paid for his crime with his life in 17 years. In 1996, Lee and his accomplice, Chevy Kehoe, were found guilty of slaying William Mueller, his wife Nancy, and their 8-year-old daughter Sarah Powell, in a plot to establish a white supremacist nation. Lee and Kehoe, who were members of a white supremacist group, burglarized the Muellers' home, tied them up, and shot them with a stun gun before drowning them in a nearby lake. Lee was arrested a few days later and charged with multiple counts, including slaying, racketeering, and conspiracy to commit a slaying.
I'm satisfied that we have the two people who were directly involved with the murder.
He said, "I didn't do it." He said, quote, "You're killing an innocent man." I have not had time to process this. One of the BOP public information officers was going to leave the room to see if they could get an update, and knowing that I could potentially be witnessing 2 more executions. It was like he was doing normal breathing, and then those breaths got shallower and shallower. He said, "Oh, turn around," and the curtain went up. And probably will choose not to even try to process this until this week is over, if I really stop to think about what happens. He looked heavier. He looked different. He looked older. I don't know that I would be able to get through that. He bears no responsibility.
In 1999, he was found guilty and sentenced by lethal injection. Lee maintained his innocence throughout the trial, claiming that he was not present during the slayings and that the prosecution relied on fabricated evidence. His appeals for a retrial and clemency were denied by the courts, and his date was set for July 14, 2020. In the weeks leading up to his punishment, Lee's case received national attention as a result of the controversy surrounding the use of the capital penalty in the U.S. Lee's attorneys argued that his punishment should be delayed due to concerns about the coronavirus pandemic, as well as issues surrounding the lethal injection drugs that were to be used. Despite these challenges, Lee's punishment proceeded as scheduled. In the hours leading up to his demise, Lee was visited by his spiritual advisor and family members. He declined to make a final statement, and his punishment was carried out shortly after 8 a.m. Number 3, Dylan Roof. Dylan Roof, a 21-year-old white supremacist, is known for committing one of the deadliest hate crimes in modern U.S. history when he opened fire on African-American worshipers during a prayer meeting at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina on June 17, 2015. The shooting claimed the lives of 9 innocent people, including the church's pastor, Clementa Pinckney. The shooting sent shockwaves throughout the country and reignited discussions about racism and gun violence in America. After the shooting, Roof fled the scene but was eventually captured by police in Shelby, North Carolina, where he had been hiding out in a car. He was brought back to Charleston to stand trial for the slayings. During the trial, Roof represented himself and showed no remorse for his actions, stating in his opening statement that, "I felt like I had to do it." He also stated that he would have carried out similar attacks at other churches if he had the chance. In December 2016, Roof was convicted on 33 federal charges, including hate crimes resulting in demise, obstruction of religion, and firearms charges. He was sentenced to his demise in January 2017, becoming the first person in U.S. history to be sentenced this way for a federal hate crime.
Y'all raped our women, and now you taking the country.
Eyes were closed. Our eyes closed. The shots rang out.
He shot the pastor, he shot all the men in the church. Please come right away.
I heard every shot. I heard every single shot.
Well, I killed him. Well, I guess.
This is a perpetrator who feels that his privileged position in...
And I said no, and he said, "I'm not going to."
He's still in here, I'm afraid. He's still in here.
Oh, no, I was worn out.
We were just about to say the prayer to be released.
He's a young 21-year-old white dude. Please, and we got some people very hurt, please.
Did I shoot you yet? When he got to me, he could hear me praying, and he said, "Shut up. I'm going to leave you here to tell a story."
In the years following his conviction, Roof's appeals were unsuccessful and he remained on the row. In the days leading up to his punishment, Roof showed no remorse for his actions and did not make any final statements. He refused to meet with his family or a spiritual advisor and even refused to take the medication offered to him by prison officials. On July 14, 2020, Roof was fatally punished by lethal injection at the federal penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. Number 2, Lawrence Brewer. Lawrence Russell Brewer was a notorious white supremacist and one of the perpetrators of one of the most heinous hate crimes in recent American history. On June 7, 1998, along with 2 other white supremacists, Brewer kidnapped James Byrd Jr., an African-American man in Jasper, Texas. They beat him severely, tied him to the back of their pickup truck, and dragged him along a rural road for 3 miles until his body was torn apart. Brewer was eventually arrested, tried, and sentenced to his demise for his role in the slaying. During his trial, the evidence presented against Brewer was overwhelming. The prosecution presented a video confession in which he admitted to being present at the scene of the crime and to participating in the slayings. The jury deliberated for just over 2 hours before finding Brewer guilty of capital slaying. At his sentencing hearing, the victims' family members and friends gave emotional testimonies about the impact of the crime on their lives. Brewer showed no remorse, making obscene gestures to the courtroom and mouthing obscenities at the victim's family. In 2011, 13 years after the crime, Brewer's punishment date was set. As the date approached, he was transferred to the Walls Unit in Huntsville, Texas, where punishments take place.
I've had to notify the family of deaths for years and years and years.
He always said that through his music, that one day I'm going to put Jasper, Texas on the map. Just wait and see.
Now, alleged white supremacist Lawrence Russell Brewer has been...
And the legacy would be that he put Jasper on the map, but it wasn't for his music.
I would like to think that this will end it for the family.
Executed for his role in the murder of James Byrd Jr.
Family was all there.
It was a case that became known for its brutality. A black man dragged.
I could not believe, that this could happen.
To death, chained to the back of a pickup truck in Jasper, Texas.
I would like to think that would end it for the majority of the people in Jasper.
Dying by lethal injection.
But that was one that was tough.
Brewer was placed on watch after he told prison officials that he was contemplating taking his own life. On the day of his punishment, he was allowed to visit with his family members and his spiritual advisor. On September 21, 2011, as the time of his punishment approached, Brewer was strapped to a gurney in the chamber. He was asked if he had any last words, to which he didn't reply. Brewer, visibly pale, looked towards the witness room occupied by his parents and brother. He did not make eye contact with Byrd's 2 sisters and niece, who occupied an adjoining witness room. Tears began to form in his eyes as he breathed heavily. Brewer was then administered a lethal injection and pronounced deceased at 6:21 p.m. Number 1, John William King. 8 years after Lawrence Brewer was put down for the infamous hate crime in East Texas, the other man involved out of the 3 was also fatally punished for his part, John William King, who was 44 years old at the time of his punishment. King had previously been involved in a white supremacist prison gang, and he was notoriously covered in racist tattoos, including Ku Klux Klan symbols, a swastika, and a visual depiction of a lynching, according to court documents. But King maintained that he was innocent in Byrd's slaying, claiming that Berry dropped King and Brewer off at their shared apartment before Byrd was beaten and dragged. In a last-minute appeal, King's attorney argued that a recent U.S. Supreme Court ruling entitled his client to a new trial because his original lawyers didn't assert his claim of innocence to the jury despite King's insistence. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals narrowly rejected this appeal, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled against stopping the punishment about 30 minutes after it was scheduled to begin. After the ruling, King was taken from a holding cell, placed on a gurney in the chamber, and hooked up to an IV. He had no personal witnesses at his punishment and spoke no final words, but he did provide a written statement beforehand that stated, "Capital punishment. They without the capital get the punishment." He was injected with a lethal dose of pentobarbital at 6:56 p.m. and pronounced deceased 12 minutes later, according to the prison department. Two of Bird's sisters and his niece plan to watch King's demise. One of the sisters, who also watched Brewer's punishment in 2011, said that she didn't understand why King's case was tied up for so long with numerous appeals. He was sentenced to his demise in February 1999.
On the official witness list are two of James Bird's sisters and his niece.
Capital punishment. Them without the capital get the punishment.
Today, we witnessed the peaceful and dignified execution of John King.
Won't be any in that room. There will be the 5 media witnesses there as well.
No remorse was shown then. It's indicative of how embedded his hate was. Really a modern day lynching.
There are no witnesses for the offender at this point, and
an inhumane murder of James on June 7, 1998.
Bird's brutal slaying drew a spotlight on the small town of Jasper and violent racism in the modern world. Evidence at trial showed police found most of the 49-year-old's body on June 7, 1998, with 3 miles of blood, drag marks, and body parts, including his head, on the road behind it. At the beginning of the gruesome trial, police found evidence of a fight, and Bird's hat and cigarette butts were later tied to King, Berry, and Brewer, according to court documents. The 3 men were arrested shortly afterward. Although King didn't give an official statement to police or testify at his trial, he wrote a letter while awaiting trial proclaiming his innocence, saying Berry knew Bird from jail and stopped the truck to pick him up after seeing Bird walking down the road. King said that Berry then dropped him and Brewer off before leaving with Bird alone. But in a jail note written to Brewer, he said he didn't think his clothes police took from their apartment had blood on them, but his sandals may have had a dark brown substance on them. Still, King maintained before and through his trial that he wanted to argue for his innocence and unsuccessfully complained to the court when, he said, his attorneys refused. His current lawyer, Richard Ellis, said in his last appeals. King claimed that because his attorneys instead conceded his guilt in the slaying, a 2018 U.S. Supreme Court ruling should have allowed him to get a new trial. In the end, no matter what his attorneys did, King could not avoid the punishment that fate had set out for him. The 3rd man involved in the gruesome case, Sean Berry, is serving a life sentence. That's all for today, folks. See you next time.